Hey, welcome back to our Bible study Journey with Jesus, where we're going through the Bible chronologically in a year using Terry Lee Cobble's The Bible Recap Study Plan. It is day 28, and we are going through Genesis 46 through 47. In the beginning of 46, we see Jacob stopping at Beersheba, and we've learned a lot about Beersheba and heard a lot about it, and it's very significant in the fact that both Abraham and Isaac had stopped there to worship God. And here you see God talking to him and reassuring him that it's okay, go into Egypt, I'm going to go with you. And it makes you wonder, was Jacob thinking about all the bad things that had happened in Egypt? Like Abraham had a bad encounter in Egypt. And like every time something because they were going against what God had told them to do and go into Egypt and not leaning on God. And so Jacob, because he constantly wrestled with himself and then whether he was going to follow God, it makes you wonder, was he praying to God or in his heart a little bit fearful? And the Lord is like, okay, this time it's okay. I'm going with you. There's nothing to fear here. And so I feel like that's such a beautiful thing, that God kind of does to us. We see it here for him, but he does it for us too. And then one thing that I thought about that another commentator mentioned was that these wagons that Pharaoh had sent, and, like they were used to walking, right? Like they weren't used, this was technology that he probably wasn't used to. And so I'm just sitting here thinking how I would feel. Like we think about these new Tesla trucks and all that kind of stuff, and it would be kind of the equivalent for them too, and just how interesting that was. And then we see in the rest of 46, like it's giving names and how many people went with Jacob to Egypt. And it ends with all the persons of the house, or doesn't end, but before he's reunited with Joseph, it talks about all the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. And a lot of the commentary that I read was that it might not have been exactly 70. Like it might have been 66, it might have been, whatever. But that the number 70 was a representation of something. And so we know numbers in the Bible are big. And so what we're seeing here is 7 times 10. 7 being a symbol, 7 times 10 being a symbol of completeness and perfection, meaning that the number of people who came into Egypt with Jacob showed the fullness and completion of Jacob's family. It was full and complete. Everybody that needed to be there with him in Egypt was going with him. And I just thought that was a really interesting perspective, and I really liked it. And also, David Guzik he mentioned that it really took a lot of time for this number to come into existence, right? We started with Isaac, and he had one son of the promise. And then we see Isaac had 2 sons of the promise. It took him 60 years to have these children. And then Jacob, it took him about 50 to 60 years to have the 12 sons and the 1 daughter, but the 12 sons. And so here we see it took 215 years for the one to become 70, give or take. Whether it's 65 or 75 or whatever, there's a bunch of different numbers. But either way, it took that long for the number of Israelites that are coming into Egypt to become that. And in contrast that, within the next 430 years, they would be 600,000 plus, potentially in the millions. We see that in Numbers, where they're taking a census and that kind of stuff whenever they're going in the land of Canaan. But I mean, for 15 years to only be 70, and then in 430 years, them to become in potentially the millions, that is such a slow growth in the beginning. But they were, once they got started, man, they went. And to contrast the 70 with the number that of descendants that was listed in chapter 36 for Esau, it was 81 that was listed in there for Esau. And so I just thought the 70 versus the 81, that's still a small number comparatively. And so I just thought that was really interesting. And then we get to the end of 46, and we see, I've mentioned this many times, how Joseph is a Christ type. And we see him even further going through and like, here, tell them this. This is what we're going to do. This is what you're going to say. Like he's guiding them along the way, and how he's advocating for them, and how Jesus is our advocate. And it's such a reminder to me, and something that was really highlighted to me this time around in reading the Bible. And so in chapter 47, we see them finally setting into Goshen and what that looks like for them. And we see one of the commentaries that I listened to had talked about, we forget that this was written by Moses, right? This was written by Moses to the Israelites while they are wandering the 40 years. And so in 47 verse, I think it is verse 9. It's the second part of verse 9. It says, hold on. Few and evil, this is where Jacob is talking to Pharaoh. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life. They have not attained to these days of the years of life of my father in the days of their sojourning. And then in verse 10, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. It's as if, like, this is the second time that it was talked about Jacob blessing Pharaoh. The very fact that Pharaoh would allow Jacob to bless him is pretty big, and it shows a very humble king in that way. But why wouldn't he be when Joseph has done so much and been such a good leader for him? But it's as if Moses is trying to kind of give the Israelites the courage while they're in their wandering. Moses is saying here to the Israelites, there was a time when the ruler of Pharaoh was blessed by the ruler of the Israelites here. For him to put that in there is pretty significant. And then we just continue to see God showing his favor to the Israelites. They are just doing nothing but prospering, them prospering and Egypt prospering. And so this really sets the stage for where we begin in Exodus. Thursday, we will begin there. Can you believe tomorrow is our last day in Genesis? One thing I wanted to highlight, because it's been said a couple times in verse 29, it talks about put your hand under my thigh. And that's such an odd thing. I know Tara Lee's kind of touched on it a little bit, but there was a really good breakdown that I wanted to share that made so much more sense to me. And so what is something that we hold sacred, right? What is a physical representation of our faith? It would be our Bible, also the cross, but our Bible. And in the same way that we, like if the president is sworn in and his hand is on the Bible, or we're swearing on the Bible, it is the same thing, because circumcision at that time was a sign of the covenant. And so by doing that, putting the hand under the thigh, it was like they were swearing on the covenantal promise of the circumcision, which was the representation. And so I just thought that was such an interesting, and it just made a lot more sense to me. So we see Jacob isn't dying yet. It's kind of like the, it's kind of like, oh, okay, he's dying now. Nope, wait. Nope, now, nope. Not that we're wanting him to die or anything, but, we know it's coming, and it's just kind of like such an epic thing. So anyway, share with me something that stood out to you that you have enjoyed, and we will come back tomorrow for our last day in Genesis, and we'll finish up Jacob's story and Joseph's story. Have a good day. Bye.